What's going on, guys? I'm YST and we're back playing some Raid Shadow Legends. So most of you by now have seen all of the teasers leading up towards the Grim Forest making its appearance in the game. For example, the Relics, the Mercurial set, as well as some of the other teasers that's been going on their social medias. We will be breaking this down a little bit later on briefly, but they've actually just revealed their first two bosses that we could take a look at today. So the first one's actually going to be the Mimic. I'm going to throw up some animations so you can see how they look in game. But it says it's a surprise boss that roams the Grim Forest. It reveals itself only when you draw near, and you can never be certain whether the treasure before you is a true reward chest or a mimic lurking behind its likeliness. This creature delights in preying upon your strongest damage dealers and feasting on the power of healing itself with every single bite. So let's just have a quick look here at the boss's skills, and he looks pretty cool, right? We gotta admit it. Like, imagine you're going in there, you're like, oh, I'm gonna get myself a nice little juicy chest. Get me some Mercurial set. But no, you're gonna be facing a chest with a tongue, something like the book out of Harry Potter. You know that one that comes from under the bed and... who cares? I'm a nerd, guys. I apologize. So with the A1 on the Plunder Pounce, he attacks all enemies and it deals additional pure damage equal to 5% of each target's max HP for each buff on them, and then has a chance of placing a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. So we gotta be wary of how much buffs that we're bringing in for our team, right? Because we're just going to be getting some more of this pure damage, and the more that it scales, the more of a smack we're going to be taking from this A1, which is interesting. And then on the A2 with the Lashing Spiral, he attacks one enemy and applies a stun debuff for 1 turn. But the scary part is he will then attack all remaining enemies if the stun debuff wasn't placed, and decrease the turn meters of the enemies without the stun by 30%. So it's almost like we want to ensure that that ally does get stunned in a sense, because having one ally that's, just out of the battle for 1 turn is a lot easier than dealing with taking a big AoE smack and getting all of our turn meters pushed back by 30%. So maybe avoiding block debuffs could be a strategy, or avoiding champions that's immune to the stun debuff, or has like a block debuff from a set, right? It's an interesting mechanic. Is there a way we can deter this? I guess we'll find out in the rest of the skill set. So with the feeding time on a 5-turn cooldown, so he summons a mini mimic, which we've seen in the animation briefly, to the battle and introduces a new debuff with ingest. And the enemy with the highest crit damage is the one that's going to be the target. So very similar to like the Phantom Shogun in Feeble Tank, at least there's a way we know who that mini mimic is going to eat in a sense. But we'll see what the ingest actually brings to the table as well. But the mini mimic's HP is equal to 20% of the mimic's HP, and its defense is equal to 70% of their defense, and has the same resistance as well. So once we kind of see what kind of stats the main boss has, I guess, we can now see how much resistance that mini mimic is going to have too, so then we can have an easier way of taking them down. Because at the start of the mimic's turn, the mini mimic deals damage equal to 25% of the target's current HP, and after 4 turns, or when the mini mimic is defeated, the target champion is returned to battle, and the mini mimic leaves the battle. Interesting. So I guess it depends how fast that the boss is, right? Or the mini mimic, because 4 turns without a champion could be pretty rough if the boss is very slow, because it doesn't say that it matches the speed of the main mimic boss, just kind of like the HP, some of the defense, and the resistance. So if it's like a Dread Bomb situation where I believe it's like a base 75 speed as the minion, you could be waiting a pretty long time if you don't take them down. So I'd probably be leaning towards taking out the mini mimic to get that ally back as fast as possible. Very similar to like Astranic's The Dark Fae, right? When she kind of banishes a champion, and then you want to get that champion back as quick as possible, right? To get back into your rotation. So yeah, kind of like an eating devour mechanic, I guess. And then places a 30% decreased speed debuff on all other enemies for 2 turns. So we're going to have a harder time kind of outpacing this boss. So what does ingest bring to the table? Sorry guys, just a bit of water. Stay hydrated, sorry. So when summoned to battle, the mini mimic will ingest the enemy champion with the highest crit damage. Whenever the mimic takes a turn in battle, the mini mimic will do damage equal to ingested champion, equal to 25% of their max HP. Oh wait, do you know what? Oh, that's scary, Scary, because even if you just put in like a dud champion, let's just say like you put your highest support in the highest crit damage just to meme it, so your other allies can have an easier time taking it out, you're going to be receiving damage equal to 25% of the current HP. Pretty wild. Okay. But while ingested, a champion is considered removed from battle. They cannot receive buffs, debuffs, instant effects, and cannot be selected as a target for a skill. The ingested state cannot be removed except by defeating the mini-mimic or waiting 4 turns, like we've already seen. A lot of repetitiveness here, raids. But when ingesting a champion, a mimic will ignore block, debuffs, veil, perfect veil, and resistance. A champion can still be ingested even if they have 10 debuffs on them. So let's just say you got 10 debuffs on your bar, and you're like, okay, I'm safe now. You're not going to be safe because the ingest is kind of going to bypass this, from what I'm reading here. And then no more than 1 mimic can be present in the battle at one time, and no more than 1 champion can be ingested at a time. So we don't have to worry about all of our allies getting gobbled up like in the Hydra clan boss, right? We don't want to be seeing that. So yeah, I guess it reads like very crazy, but in essence, it is a pretty simple mechanic. Like, highest crit damage target's gonna get ingested. We want to take out the ingested ally as fast as possible, otherwise you're waiting 4 turns. You could be receiving some damage. He's got some stats and similarity to the main mimic boss himself. The main boss is going to be stunning an ally. We kind of want that to happen so we don't get an AoE attack. And also just be wary of the buffs that we're placing on our teammates. So with the Fortune's Feast passive, for every 3 buffs the enemy team receives, decreases the cooldown of the feeding time skill by 1 turn. So this one here. And at the start of the Mimic's turn, if there is a mini-Mimic present in the battle, will heal the Mimic by 25% of its max HP. That is scary. Because let's just say that you're wearing down the main Mimic, right? Oh, that's rough. It's like, who do you target? I guess you have to get the Mimic out, even if... because he's just going to be in an infinite heal race. Like, let's just say you don't take out the Mimic, you wait 4 turns. That's a lot of healing that the boss is going to receive, so you want to make sure you've got the capabilities to wipe out that mini-mimic rapid, you know? Otherwise, the boss is just going to be, like, infinitely doing it, and because he's decreasing the cooldown of the feeding time skill for every 3 buffs the enemy team receives on us... yeah, so he's kind of, like, countering the amount of buffs. He wants to limit how much buffs that you're bringing to the table, right? And then he's healing by a big portion. Almighty Immunity is immune to all crowd control effects like many bosses, but also Enfeeble, Nullify, Ensnare, Fatigue, and Hunter's Gaze, being some of the newer versions, and Berserk. Almighty Persistence, all temperature reduction effects are decreased by 50% against this boss, so we're not going to be able to allure chain him, right? Just keep him down. It's not going to happen. Unless you got like 5 allures, but we're not going to be putting that in our decks, right? Okay, so Awakening Weakness, very similar passive here to Amius Taluna Archon, where it decreases the damage inflicted by the boss for each awakening level, with the kind of scaling values according to the star blessing, and then increases the damage received by the boss for each awakening level as well. Alright, so we're going to be relying on... sorry, I should have moved myself out of the way, guys, sorry. So we're going to have to be wary of which champions we're bringing with high star blessings. Alright, well, it is what it is. We've seen this before with Amius. Amius is still doable without crazy high star blessings. I remember the first time that I beat it, right? I only had like 2 champions with 1 star blessings on each. So I think I had quite a lot of stars on Venomage though. I was like my tank for the alternate form when he targets. So yeah, hopefully not too crazy without, but obviously the more you can bring in, the better it's going to be, and the easier time you're going to have taking down this boss. Almighty Strength, damages from this skills that skill based on max HP cannot exceed 5%, not the 10%. And then HP burn debuffs cannot exceed 1% of the max HP. So yeah, a lot of damage reductions. Blessings are very important here. Temperature reduction effects still may be valuable, but not to the same degree as it would be on normal Fire Knight, for instance, up to like stage 20. Immune to crowd control effects, so it looks like he cannot be controlled. We want to be wary of buffs, so we're not taking more damage. And also, every 3 buffs the enemy team receives, he's decreasing that cooldown. It's rough, man. Yeah, it looks like a damage race, and avoiding that stun as well. Or letting the stun happen so you don't take a lot of damage. I wonder if you could deter this. Like, sometimes like the highest attack or the highest this, highest that. I wonder if we can deter that stun. It's something I'm definitely going to playtest. But I guess let's just head into the next boss here. Phrygius the Trovemaster, and look at this dude. He actually reminds me of Nari the Lucky. Is it like his long-lost cousin or something? Or his dad? Who knows? But he looks pretty badass with the animations, and, you know, you kind of see that gold armor go up with that new buff as well, with gold-plated, which is pretty sweet. But yeah, here's the skills, guys. Here's the skills. So Mine attacks all enemies and has a 50% chance of stealing one random buff from each enemy. It's kind of like the AoE version of Nari's A1, if you think about it. And then Can't Catch Me attacks all enemies, places decreased speed and decreased attack on all enemies for 2 turns, steals 30% of their turn meter, and this effect cannot be resisted by targets under any buffs. Oh, that's a sticky one, because it's, you know, there's so many like sets that grant you buffs, or, you know, just buffs in general. There's so many support champions you want to consider just to keep your allies alive. And, you know, if they cannot be resisted by targets under any buffs, it doesn't say it can't be blocked, though. You know, so, you know, block debuffs should be a thing here, in my opinion. Damage inflicted by this skill increases by 10% for each gold-plated layer. So the gold-plated buff itself grants Phrygius the Trovemaster layers of additional HP beyond their max HP. Gold-plated layers cannot be removed, stolen, or have their duration increased or decreased. So there's not going to be a way to manipulate it and cheese it and get around it. You just basically have to deal damage from what I'm seeing with my first impressions. But when Phrygius receives damage while under gold-plated layers, it is first applied to the gold-plated layers. Each layer of gold-plated can block a certain amount of damage and is destroyed after receiving that amount of damage. And when a gold-plated layer is destroyed, Phrygius will receive damage equal to that value of the layer, and other enemies will receive a portion of that damage. Any surplus damage to the layer is dealt directly to Phrygius. Okay, interesting. So, obviously, we want to be taking down these layers. How hard it's going to be, we're going to have to wait to find out. I'm just curious if all other enemies will receive a portion of that damage. Does that mean he's going to have some minions, or does that mean to our allies? I'm not sure if I'm just reading it wrong here. But okay, let's just go into the rest, and maybe it'll kind of clear that up. So Hardened Avarice. So places 5 layers of this gold-plated on Trovemaster. Each layer is equal to 10% of his max HP. Alright, so if he's got 5 layers, okay, that's quite a lot of HP to get through. And whenever a layer is destroyed, deals damage to Phrygius equal to the value of the gold-plated layer. Also deals damage to Phrygius enemies equal to 5% of the gold-plated layer value. So it looks like are we the ones taking the damage here? Also deals damage to Phrygius enemies. So of course we want to go through those gold-plateds, but at the same time, we're going to be getting damage for each one that's taken off. That's a crazy strong buff, man. That's a crazy strong buff. You know, it's adding sustain to the boss. We're receiving damage from what I'm reading here. But he is also going to take loads of damage from it, from the times that you're taking it off. Okay. So fills Phrygius' turn meter 10% each time a gold plate is destroyed, so he's going to be cutting in. And while under layers, Phrygius cannot evade. Oh, he's going to have an evade mechanic. Oh, that's scary. That's scary. Bit of a Shredder vibe going on. 24 Carat Thief has a 10% chance of evading an enemy skill and all of its accompanying effects. Increases his speed by 5 and chance to evade by 2%. Each turn he is under at least 1 gold-plated layer. Oh man, it's like a damage race. Oh no. It's a damage race. Oh, that's scary. That's scary. That is scary. Stacks up to 200. So you want to be taking off these gold-plated layers as fast as possible, because every single turn that he's taking, he's stacking up to 200 speed and 50% chance to evade. If he's at least under 1 gold-plated layer. That's scary. I'm just thinking, like, obviously it depends how fast he is, how quickly we can deplete the layers, and, you know, we want to be bringing in some dominant champions to be able to deal with that. Okay, he's also immune to crowd control effects and awakening weaknesses. Damages from skills cannot exceed 5% as well. He's immune to decreased speed, so we cannot slow him down, and damage from HP burn debuffs cannot exceed 1%. I don't know. Let me know, guys. What do you feel about these bosses? Of course, it's just the first impressions. I don't like to go too deep into it because usually, like even with Amius, right? When we first read it, it was blocks of text. We were like, damn, this is crazy. We're never going to be able to do this. But once you actually break it down and playtest it a bit, sometimes it's a lot easier, I guess, than expected. But with it being hard and normal mode, and a level cap of 55 just to enter it, I'm assuming he's going to be a pretty hard boss, right? Let's be real. But, you know, some new mechanics are gold-plated. We had ingest with the Mimic. You know, we got different mechanics to take him down, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. All right, guys, so that was it for the bosses. So we're not going to be going into all of the relics here. I'll just put them on the screen so you can see them all if you've not seen them yet. I think my favorite ones, probably in the legendary and mythic tier, honestly. I think the Soulmark Crystal has some potential with once per round, whereas a 50% chance of activating an instant turn effect when one or more allies are killed, going up to 100%. So we're probably not going to be able to max it up. I've not even maxed up one piece yet, or relic on my account after all this time. But, you know, just putting this on maybe one of your revivers so they can cut in and revive an ally with that instant turn. I guess it can come clutch in some areas like PvP or some PvE waves. I guess Spore Burst Rod, whenever a wearer places poison debuffs or bomb debuffs, has a 10% chance of placing a second debuff for 2 turns, and only counts for the debuffs placed by the active skill. So for someone like a Nishak Vermin Lord or, you know, just poisoners out there, it's just that extra tick you could potentially get on those enemies, granted a low chance, right? But, you know, bit of extra one there, it's alright. And then with the mythic ones, I really like the Lens of Intangibility. Probably never going to get it, but if I do, I would love to have it. Because where it ignores 10% of a target's defense, and at the start of the round applies Perfect Veil to this champion, and while under Veil or Perfect Veil, the ignores goes up to another 5%. And you get some extra ignore defense values as well. So hypothetically, it's what, 10%, 15% while under Veil, and 3, 6, and 30% ignore defense. That's really, really powerful, man. Really powerful. Granted, it's only 2 turns started around for Perfect Veil, but then you'll just have to start relying on people like Glaikad or Duchess Lilitus, Rector Drafts to kind of keep you above board in areas like Hydra, right? But for an opening round, being able to ignore that much, if you fully scale it and rank it up, that's going to be a pretty crazy one, allowing you to reach full ignore defense way more easier. And then with the Coronet of Gloom, when all allies are dead, places a block damage on the wearer for 1 turn and has a chance of placing this buff when a single ally dies. So I guess, what is it, just buying time for your reviver to kind of cycle back round or something? When all wearer's allies are dead, places a block damage on the wearer for 1 turn. Okay, so it's a smaller chance for a single one. You know, if you get like an insta wipe perhaps, and you know, you're like the last one standing, maybe Calvalax goes through and boom, poison, 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 you don't have stone skin anywhere, and you might have stone skin on your reviver. You then come through, block damage, boom, you're protected, bring them back. So a bit of a buying time for survival. Lens of Intangibility definitely takes it, in my opinion, for the best mythic one. Legendary, I probably lean towards the Soulmark Crystal personally. RNG, but I'd say it's got a better chance than placing those extra debuffs, for instance. In terms of epics, I'd probably, you know, the Terminator one is okay. Maybe a bit of healing themselves from the damage received. And then the rare ones. Okay. And then we've also got the Mercurial set and accessories where with the variable set, up to 9 piece, you get HP percent, some speed, some resistance, and the new Total Guard stacks, which I'm going to be breaking down in a future video once we get to play test it. Because I've got some unanswered questions with that, which I need to try out. Like, does the subsequent hits kind of take down the stacks? Or, you know, does poison and damage, for instance, in the same phase take off 2 different stacks? Or is it all just 1 turn, does 1 stack? I don't know. I need to playtest it first to fully get a grasp on it. And in terms of teasers, so we got the Grim Forest squad. Before you venture into the Grim Forest, you must fill 2 team decks with your best champions to create a squad. Every battle in this game mode will begin by drawing random champions from these decks. You can only build your team to take on a specific stage from their number. So on normal mode, you require 10 champions per deck with 2 decks for Team 1 and Team 2. And on hard mode, you're requiring 20 champions per deck, Team 1 and Team 2. So once again, some unanswered questions here, right? Because let's just say you're going into a specific encounter, they're drawing random champions from this deck, and you get like, I don't know, 5 support champions, and you're like, damn, I need some damage here, dude. You know? You can get really unlucky with some RNG. Or is it like specific types of champions? It kind of draws it out like attack-based, defense-based, support-based, you know, defense-based, all of these different bases, and they kind of throw it into a team. I don't know. I got no clue, guys. I gotta be honest. I don't know. But, you know, it's interesting, to say the least, as long as it's done correctly. Like, let's just say you go into a floor, you got some crappy picks, and then you want to try a different team. Can you now say, give me another team raid from my deck, please? Can you not use that champion again that you just lost with? I don't know. We have to wait and see, man. We're gonna have to wait and see. And then we've also got the Grim Forest stages. A few little clues here. So sometimes you can move through them undeterred. Sometimes there's an ambush. And sometimes you can find treasure chests or grim charms. So, yeah, I guess the ambush is going to be like the grim boss. Or which boss was it called? The Mimic. The Mimic boss. You might see him once in a while. Then these stages contain various enemies from waves or lower tier champions to mythical bosses. Okay. And then speedrun, face all bosses at once or take your time and defeat them by one. Can you really face all the bosses at once? Like, can you imagine it's just like a big pop-up, right? You get to like one of the final bosses, probably this dude that's in the silhouette who we don't know yet. But you can see there's like, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 bosses teased there, I guess. But you know, can you imagine going up to the final dude and it's like, all right, guys, you get this reward if you just face him by himself. Or if you're feeling like crazy, you're going to face all 5 of them at the same time and they come out from the forest or something. I don't know, but I'll probably just face the boss by itself for first before killing 5. That's pretty wild. But yeah, guys, on that note, that is going to be all for today's video. Just wanted to get back into making a bit more content again and speak about some of the new feature with the Grim Forest and the new bosses. I might have got some of the skills wrong with how you're going to beat them and stuff, but you better be damn sure I'm diving into them like I did with the Doom Tower. I'm pretty looking forward to it, and hopefully you guys are as well. You know, it's a bit like the Cursed City and Doom Tower, a bit of a cross in terms of the map structure, but I think there's enough here for it to still feel fresh, especially with some innovative boss designs, which would be pretty cool. Alright guys, I'll leave you there, and I'll see you all on a video soon. Peace.